Hey, Scott, thank you so much. I would like to thank you for your, very kind considerations. I learned a lot, okay, from your first observation. And also, I took a lot of notes, okay? So thank you for all the insights. And I'd like also to express my gratitude and appreciation for each and every one who are responsible for having me and of course Sebrae Nacional, in such a relevant and auspicious encounter. Okay, Líderes em Movimento, and mainly my three colleagues, the competent directors of Sebrae Paraná, Vitor, Gava, and Júlio. Alongside with you, Professor Scott, I will have a short walk through the challenge of leading human beings. Regarding my studies in specific, it examines the understudied, as I consider, role of followership in the selection and development of principled and transformational leaders. The prime reference for this study was the 2016 presidential election in the US. The study also outlines the attributes of what I called regenerative leaders. Professor Scott addressed some matters regarding the neuroscience, regarding change, that I would like to talk a little bit before we wrap up our conversation, but in the next phase. That said, with this present study, that was my capstone project, I intended to suggest new approach and insights for perfection, the follower-leader relationship. Thus, it is essential to establish an accurate starting point. So, therefore, this conversation will begin with the firm premise that followers do hold sway over leaders. As the title suggests, the topic of this conversation is the role of followership in influence leadership. And its research question is, how can followers foster a new generation of principled and transformational leaders? The key distinction here is in the choice to place followers ahead of leaders. In other words, my study acknowledges not only that followers hold sway over leaders, as I said before, but also that followers, in fact, take precedence over leaders. It seems unlikely that anyone would dispute that. By definition, any follower leader relationship or leader follower relationship is, at very least, a two-way exchange. This concept is supported by Poe and Blanchard in Situational Leadership Theory, 1985. In a situational leadership context, argument preponderates over authority. So, therefore, guidance is provided by expertise, not per power per se. Centuries before Christ, Aristotle himself already stated that he who cannot be a good follower cannot be a good leader. In other words, leaders and followers are involved in a permanent, ongoing process of exchange. And for a successful leader led interaction to occur, both an adaptive leadership style and the existence of a mature followership are required. Therefore, considering leaders as the locomotives that supply motivational power to the system, I argue the following. Good leaders understand that one of the most important tasks of any government, any party, and any institution or organization related, of course, to the present subject matter, is to foster a new generation of principled and transformational leaders. However, only great leaders fully understand the task of fostering a new generation of astute and transformational followers. Evidence suggests that neither of these two modalities can be said like dominate, if you will, the current global arena. For instance, in 2016 presidential election in your country, Professor Scott, the presidential election revealed how let's say not positive is not to promoting fresh leaders. And the former President Barack Obama was a sort of representation of this reality because, as I could see, and if you allow me just to make a parenthesis, as John Adams, and I would like to quote him, as John Adams said, facts are disturbing things. And whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, and the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the states of facts and evidence. So I tried to make my capstone project founded in facts, in numbers. So back then, President Obama had fostered zero new leaders, not only for his party, the Democratic Party, of course, but also for the entire country. In the Democratic Party, the two main names that disputed the nomination, 2016, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, as a matter of fact, Bernie Sanders was independent, but they were respectively 69 and 75 back then, precisely in November 8th, the election day. So I'm meaning 5 years ago. So I don't want to elaborate so much in this matter, but I can, for instance, just highlight the four main names of Barack Obama's administrations. Joe Biden, our current president of the United States, 74 back then, 5 years ago. John Kerry, that also takes part of Biden's administration, 73, 5 years ago. Senator, the minority leader, Senator Harry Reid from Nevada, 77, 5 years ago. And Nancy Pelosi, the current Speaker of the House, 76, also 5 years ago. Nothing against aging. As a matter of fact, we can learn a lot from people that has a lot of experience. I'm just expressing here how it is kind of complicated for us not to foster new leaders, okay, not to give the opportunity for new talents to flourish. That's my point. That's the crux of my matter. So the inexistence of fresh leaders leads to the inexistence of fresh followers. So therefore, the symptoms of premature aging prevail. This cycle, that is not a virtuous one, could be identified also in Obama's era. I'm not going to elaborate on this matter, but the losses of 9 U.S. Senate seats, the losses of 62 Senates in the House during his administration from 256 to 194, the losses of 2 governorship, and so on. Specifically, with regard to the U.S. Congress, the Democrat, after the Obama's administration, the Democrat had the smallest congressional minority since 1929. And I think this is a kind of consequence of this not fostering new leaders. So consequently, we are all longing for what I consider to be regenerative leaders, longing for those kind of leaders. This can be summarized as inspiring altruistic figures whose unflinching beliefs have played a decisive role in engraving their names on the history of mankind, due both to the feats they accomplished during their lives and to the exemplary moral legacy that they left to shape future generations. Putting it differently, regenerative leaders deliver a leadership style that transcends the well-known 4 I's of the transformational leaders that Professor Scott is very familiar also with it from 1985. That is, idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. Thus, to wrap up this initial part, using this existing concept as a foundation to generate our new concept, I will outline here the 11 attributes that define, as I could study and choose to define, the regenerative leaders. First, they embrace the infinite improvement, what could even be considered as a 5th eye, if you will. Regenerative leaders know the tiny little fraction they do and are aware of the myriad of issues that they don't know. Thus, they are humble enough to study what is unknown to them so that they may assuage their lack of knowledge in the topics at hand. They understand that the adoption of the never-ending process of unlearning and relearning is both rejuvenating and indispensable. Give that one may see similarity between the infinite improvement that I called and the intellectual simulation of the transformational leadership theory. It is an opportunity now to make a clear distinction between them. In the former idea, leaders challenge themselves to excel. In the latter idea, leaders challenge followers to excel. So they are complementary to each other indeed. I'm not sure if I'm going to have the time to explain to detail, to elaborate on the other 10. So I'm going to highlight the names and then we may explain in the next moment. So second, I would say that regenerative leaders, they have lack of attachment to power itself. This is a fundamental trait, okay? Fundamental trait. And then just for this one, to better understand this virtue, I will point out a feature of my motherland in Portuguese. The verb to be is represented by two distinct verbs, so that while one expresses a temporary circumstance that we call estar, for example, I am the President of the United States. The other reflects a permanent condition, ser. For instance, in this case, I am Eduardo, so permanent. Regenerative leaders have lack of attachment to power itself, first and foremost because they fully comprehend this distinction, and also because they know both that the power is ephemeral and that serving in a public office is not about themselves personally, but about the collectivity. So the third trait is they give credit where credit is due. The fourth, they know that there are no one-size-fits-all leaders. So that they have this flexibility and the adaptability. The fifth, I'm just like summarizing because, as I mentioned, the time is very short for me to elaborate on in all these the others. So they speak, the fifth one, they speak not only to the hearts of their constituents, but to the hearts of the entire population. And above them, they are heard by all. It's a very difficult trait. 6, they act based on the truth and not on fleeting convenience. They do not sugarcoat reality and do not tell white lies to themselves nor to others. They seek out the unvarnished truth for themselves and communicate it to the collective with compassion. 7, they define their non-negotiables with precision. And while they are unfleeting about them, they are flexible in accommodating everything else. Why, with this mandate in place, let me elaborate on this a little bit, they leave their marks on history due to their ability to pull off strategic plans that are beneficial to the many, not only to the few, and due to their exemplary moral legacy, which helps to shape current and future generations. 8, they cherish followers who opt to walk a non-conforming path, okay? They just don't like the yes men. 9, I would say they fully advocate the regenerative leaders. The 9th trait, they fully advocate that instead of sameness, pluralism is in fact the guarantor of complementarity, which is an indispensable factor in extraordinary outcomes. 10th, they uphold two fundamental principles, one informal and one legal, which are the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes, which is a prerequisite to building rapport. And Professor Scott talking about rapport, and I mentioned this word, but he was meaning that as I understood. And the legal one. And also, of course, they follow the rule of law, which is a prerequisite to protecting the social fabric. And the last one, the 11th, they diligently work to foster a new generation of principled and life changing leaders, as well as a new generation of astute and life changing followers. They know that the condition of leadership depends upon the condition of followership. In other words, followers are as good as the quality of leaders they choose to represent them. So, therefore, both must be superlative to spawn both superb outcomes and a virtuous cycle.
Thank you, gentlemen. That was great. Please, now feel free to comment and add to each other's talk.
So, Professor Scott, I would like to finish at this point now and roll the ball to you as we could keep talking.
What you shared, Eduardo, it very much fits in my paradigm and understanding from working with leaders and researching. And I think part of my response would be to do those things that you just outlined, the list. You have to first spend time in getting yourself clear on what are your values, what is your vision, what is it that is going to define your ability to grow future leaders. Without that pre-work, we get pulled into the stress, the challenge, the complexity, and we become insular, defensive, controlling, inward focused. And I love the idea that leaders of today absolutely must grow followership like never before and get out of the way, because the younger generation is ready to do it. The inhibitors a lot of times are those that are sitting in seats too long. Yeah, wonderful.
That is perfect, Professor. Thank you. Thank you so much for your considerations. I'd like to hear more from you, because if I say something, I'm not going to add anything to me, and maybe not to anyone. But hearing you, everybody is going to get a lot of new informations and get more clever. That is perfect. And Professor, when you mentioned the number one, create a connection with you, you mentioned trust, and then it reminded me when I was doing my master at Georgetown University in DC. Georgetown made a kind of research, and they identified that there were only two positive traits there were worldwide. One was decisiveness, and the other one, according to this research, was trustworthiness. Mm-hmm. So it goes to the same direction. And if you allow me, you mentioned about neuroscience, and I would like to add, I believe it's the same direction, psychological strengths. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, we must find a way to teach our youth key strengths such as self-reliance, resourcefulness, introspection that you mentioned introspection, eagerness, fellowship, resilience, and awareness. From my perspective, this is a vital prerequisite to undertaking the direction that I was talking here, and we talked together about the generation of new followers. So I would like, if you allow me, to mention three specific points, because for us to foster not only a new generation of principled and transformational leaders, but also and especially, if you allow me to emphasize and underscore, especially to foster a new generation of principled and transformational followers, I would like to delineate three pivotal qualities of such inspirational followers. First, they are more intellectually stern with themselves. Aspirational followers prefer to challenge their view of the world rather than simply seeking confirmation. They accept the premise that data ultimately trumps beliefs, and firmly ground their assessments in reality. They embrace the beginner's receptive mindset so that when their previous perceptions differ from the current examination of the real world, what they do, they update their understanding and welcome the new version. With this mandate in place, they are able to comprehend that it is acceptable, no problem to be wrong.
Mhm.
And likewise, it is unforgivable to be consciously remaining wrong. Two, and I will end on the third one, they know that nothing is given and that everything must be earned. Aspirational followers, as we are defining now, acknowledge that our current political road no longer accommodates gullible individuals. That's so obvious, but
Yeah.
sometimes has to be said. So they are unwilling to let others lopsidedly cherry pick or nitty pick information for them. They take the driver's seat in deciding their own thoughts and refuse to sit on the sidelines, hoping that whatever decisions the current leadership makes will be in the followers' best interest. They understand and practice the proactive role of followership. And to finish the third trait, those aspirational followers, they reject being part of the problem and long to become part of the solution, regardless of the craziness of the day to day political debate. Aspirational followers do not see, and this is very vital, do not see as an enemy everyone who has political views different from their own. Rather, they see a person, a human being behind the interlocutor, not either an ally or an antagonist.
Mhm.
They cherish pluralism and they do not do whatever it takes, quotation mark, to impose their opinions on others, understanding that victory in political battles is not a goal per se. They inspire to reach the old age with the gratifying feeling that they could not have done anything better to improve society and make the world a better place. And most of the times, they do that anonymously, at least discreetly. So followers capable of leading those strengths I have described, I believe if we could contribute, Professor, to build both those leaders, the regenerative leaders, and these aspirational followers. And if we could add the absolutely inspiring and auspicious insights you brought, we could be a very better world. That is perfect, Professor. I think now we are about to conclude this very, very good for me. I learned a lot, as I mentioned to you, and my notes only increase. So I believe now we have to hand over to our mediators. But before doing that, I would like to express again my gratitude. And to be precise, this was a great gift for me, okay, to have this opportunity to talk to you, to meet you, okay, and learn from you as I did now. And I hope that everybody that is taking part of this on this conversation with us, they also have the same feeling by the end of this conversation. So thank you very much for everyone that is involved in this initiative. And thank you, Professor, for your insights and for this opportunity for me to have this honor to chat with you.
It's been the honor for me.
I'd like to say thank you for both, but I have a question before you go. I'd like to ask a question for you both. How can we encourage the youth to get involved in leadership, like in politics, in social issues, and more?
Yeah, I'll see. I wouldn't dare to add anything on Professor's remarks. But as a final message, I would like to try to instill a sense of urgency in everyone every person that it's following this conversation here with us. And I would like to paraphrase Pink Floyd. We need trailblazers who have the willingness to, as he said, trade cold comfort for change, and so exchange a leading role in a cage for a walk on par in the war. So go off and lead. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you very much. Thank you for you both for sharing your experience, for your knowledge. It is very very nice for us and for everybody is here listening you in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure. Be well.